Good morning, Breakfast with Bacon fans. The face on the screen you may be familiar with, you may not. For me, it was 2018 when the Summer of Shame happened. And, I talked to my mom, who's a devout Catholic, and she's not even familiar with that term. She's been one of those Catholics who's just praying and fasting and living her life. And she's like, you're telling me these things that I never knew. Well, in the Summer of Shame is when we all started learning what was going on in the church. And as a good Catholic girl, I thought our priests, our bishops, they were all just good, holy people that never needed to go to confession because they didn't sin. That I found church militant. And on that show was this man in front of you today, Michael Hichborn. And before I tell you a little bit more about him and the Lepanto Institute, I want to say welcome, Michael, to the Breakfast with Bacon show. I'm so glad I finally snagged you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, well, thank you. So I've been learning as I watch my shows to upload them. I talk too much and I don't want to do that. So I'm going to turn right over to you in terms of the Lepanto Institute you founded in what year?
We formally founded in January of 2015. I got the ball rolling a couple of months beforehand, but effectively our first start date was January of 2015.
Why?
Well, I was working in American Life League, and while I was working there, we were digging up all kinds of stuff regarding Catholic relief services, the Catholic Campaign for Human Development. I wound up doing a deep dive investigation of Caritas Internationalis, and it became obvious to the two of us that my research was kind of taking us outside the scope of the mission of American Life League. And
you said American what?
American Life League.
Okay.
So it's Judy Brown's organization.
Okay. And it was a Catholic organization.
Catholic pro-life organization. So their mission was primarily pro-life stuff. And I was finding stuff that kind of went beyond the scope of just the pro-life movement. I was finding things regarding the promotion of homosexuality, transgenderism, Marxism. And even though they're tangentially linked, it did go outside the scope of their mission. So we had a conversation about, what we should do. And we both agreed, all right, it's time for me to step aside and to launch my own initiative. And by the grace of God, we got things going, and we hit the ground running, and we haven't stopped since. So it was effectively through the investigations I was doing at American Life League that led to my being able to conduct these investigations, to continue and to expand on everything that we've been looking into.
But you're a husband and father, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's got to be, I don't want to say expensive proposition, but risky, because when you go into these 501c3s or these charities, or you start your own business, it's scary because, God, are you going to bless this? And people aren't just going to throw money at you like, oh, go dig up research on the priests and the bad guys and the bishops.
You're absolutely right. So when I told my wife about the conversation that I'd had, I fully expected to say, well, I guess I'm just going to have to shift positions here so I can continue to provide for my family. And my wife said, oh, it's time for you to leave. I went, who are you and where's my wife?
I'm a wife. I get that. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. And it was a very interesting proposition. I had 3 days to give them a choice. And for 3 days, my wife and I talked about it. We prayed on it. And on the third day, we were talking in the kitchen, and she said, well, it sounds like you're going to leave. And I said, it sounds that way, doesn't it? Yeah. So I got in the car, I'm driving, I'm praying my rosary, and I just stopped. I said, Lord, I don't know what I'm doing here. I said, I have no clue what I'm supposed to do because I can't see what's on the other side of the hill. I don't know if this is something you want me to do or not. I need the big neon sign that says, yes, do this. So you're going to have to tell me what it is I'm supposed to do here. And when I prayed that, the inspiration I got was, as soon as you get to work, call your spiritual director and do whatever he tells you. And I said, okay, fine, that's great. My hands are clean. I don't have to worry about this.
Right.
So I get to work. I call my spiritual director. I tell him everything. And he says, Michael, I know you, I know your wife, I know your situation. He said, it's time for you to leave and start your own thing. Okay. That was it. So that night, I get home, I tell my wife everything, and we're talking till late at night. She falls asleep. I'm still up because I've got that nervous, what the heck did I just do kind of energy.
Yeah.
And I started talking to Our Lady and I said, okay, this morning I made my decision through the rosary. So everything that I'm going to do from here on out is going to be at your direction. So why don't we start with, what do we call this thing? And
go there.
In my head, I get Lepanto Institute. Thought, okay, I like that. You know, the Battle of Lepanto. My family, my personal family history has a long line of sailors, long Navy maritime history, and I said, okay, I like that naval stuff. That's great, and it's got a kind of a militant edge to it too. So that was awesome. And I said, an institute. It's like a think tank. It's got kind of a research element to it. So yeah, that sounds great. And then I got a little smart with Our Lady and I said, all right, what does the logo look like? And in my head, what you see right behind me is what came to mind. A ship surrounded by a rosary with the words Lepanto Institute on either side, and the meaning came along with it. So the ship represents the naval battle of Lepanto because the church was facing three primary crises: Protestantism, heresy, and Islam. And it was recourse to the rosary that brought about the victory at that time. And today, the ship also represents the bark of Peter, and the church is facing the same three major crises: Protestantism, heresy, and Islam. And it is recourse to the rosary that is going to bring about the triumph of Our Lady's Immaculate Heart.
Yes.
Wow. Boom. I mean, it was like that scene in The Matrix when all the guns go running on either side. That's kind of how it flooded my mind. And I was like, whoa, you know, I was full of energy, couldn't go to sleep, finally fell asleep. The next morning, I was up first, which never happens because I am not a morning person. And my wife came out and she said, you're up early.
Why are you up?
Yeah.
It was Our Lady.
Why? So I told her the story. I told her about the conversation I had with Our Lady, and she goes, well, that's appropriate. What do you mean? Why is that appropriate? She says, well, because of what yesterday was.
What was it, like October 13th or what?
It was October 7th. And I said, okay.
It's Our Lady of the Rosary, right?
Feast of Our Lady of the Rosary, the anniversary of the Battle of Lepanto.
Oh, it was?
Wasn't even on my mind.
Wow.
So there you go.
And you know, I don't like to say this out loud because I didn't have the money, but the guy's like really good. And to pay just to get a logo, he's like, look, I'm $1,000. I was like, oh, and I'd had my business for years. I was like, I got to get my logo. And so to have a logo download into your head is such a, I mean, God could have saved me $1,000 if he'd have done that for me.
Yeah.
Right. But no, the idea that the name, the logo, as business people, we just are always working like what's going to be the best so we can capture clients and blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, this must, and the fact that your wife was on board right away, because, you know, I've been married 39 years. My husband and I are like, we got to chew on things. But Michael, when those things fall into place, when the Lord is speaking to both you and your bride, the one flesh spouse is like, you need to do this, you know, they opened doors for you and said, get to work. This is what you need to do.
Wow.
Wow.
We've been in operation now for 8 years. So it's very much a labor of love and a labor of faith. And we stepped out in faith. I told Our Lady that I'll continue to do this as long as she keeps me funded. The moment the funds dry up, I know she's not happy with me anymore, and I'll go find something else to do.
You're right. Well, so let's talk a little bit. Let's fast forward to 8 years. So really, when you started this business, you were starting to see, correct me anytime I misspeak, but shady dealings or things that are like, this is not in line with the Catholic Church. So you're doing that research, and then eventually I want to get to what we're going to talk about today is this the recent report you guys did on the Catholic Campaign for Human Development. Yeah, right. So you're finding things that we, the average Catholic, do not want to hear. What is your goal? Is your goal just exposing the rot or ending the rot? Or if I asked you what's the mission statement before we kind of go into that of Lepanto Institute, what would you say it is?
So in a nutshell, what we do is we help people who are Catholic to know and understand where their money is going and what charitable organizations they should be supporting and which ones to avoid. Because let's face it, there are so many charities out there, you don't have time to research them all.
You don't.
And quite honestly, I don't have time to research them all either. But what I do is I research as many of the big ones that I possibly can so that people can know and understand that, look, there are organizations out there that put on a good Christian face, but what they're doing is they're supplying the enemies of Christ. They are providing funds to organizations that are promoting abortion. They're providing funds to organizations that are propping up, contraception as a means of combating abortion and so forth. Some of them are even promoting transgenderism.
I was just going to say they're into the LGBTQ things, which goes totally against the Catholic faith. All of these things do. And yet the money is very sneakily finding its way into the pockets of the people that were fighting. And I'm so grateful that you exposed it. You guys were responsible for exposing the money going into Pence, weren't you?
Yeah.
And Pence that founded the kind of homo biopic Rocket Man.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So we exposed that. We've been exposing some universities. We exposed Marian University. I did a whole series over at Church Militant called Queering of a Catholic University. And I went through step by step and I showed, here are all the different professors that are promoting homosexuality and transgenderism. Here are the ones who are practicing. Here are the different clubs on campus that are promoting homosexuality and transgenderism. Here are the events that are taking place on campus, that kind of thing. A couple of years ago, I did an expose on a radio station up at, what's the name of the university? It's up there in Newark, New Jersey. The radio station is WSOU, and it's attached to the diocesan university. And WSOU is broadcasting literally satanic music. We're talking music that is promoting just the worst, most vile thing you can think of. They've got prayers to Satan written into the lyrics of their songs, and this is all being broadcast from a Catholic university. So we see that there is a steady assault on the faith that is taking place from within. And as I was doing my investigations on Campaign for Human Development and Catholic Relief Services, what finally came to light is that there are infiltrators within our church who are operating in the mechanisms of the church, specifically through charity. They're perverting what charity really is, and they're using the industry of charity. And let's face it, Catholics are some of the most charitable people on the planet.
Yeah.
And they're using their goodwill in order to finance the enemies of the cross of Christ. So that's why we exist. That's what we're trying to do. We're not attacking the church. We're trying to defend the faith of the faith.
They're trying to defend the church.
Right.
So I guess I know how you got started. Like you were doing the research at your last job and then you come here. So, probably you already had a couple organizations, but it seems to me, unless you have a staff of 1,000, that's an overwhelming amount of work to do, just knowing which teachers at a university. I was teaching at a university. I don't even know. Well, I'm still teaching, but I don't even know all the teachers at the university. I don't even know all the teachers in my own department. So to know what they're teaching, what textbooks they're using, that has got to be overwhelming. How did you, the deepest answer is by the grace of God, right?
Yeah.
But how did you know which rabbit trails to follow to get this? Did you feel like a divine inspiration there, or did it come to you like a water hose? You're like, I just got to pick this or pick that, or
A lot of it just starts with a question. Somebody will send a question, or I'll have a question about something, and it's just, well, what does this organization do? And you look at their mission statement, you look at their activities, and then you say, okay, well, does this who's their leadership? Because as they say, personnel is policy.
Yeah.
So I start looking at the leadership of the organization and saying, all right, what are you involved in? What are you promoting? What are your affinities? And I look at what they do on social media. I cross-reference their name with various keywords in newspaper clippings. So I'm looking through the news, I'm looking through their activities. And if there's anything that's kind of funny or off, where somebody says, yeah, we promote diversity. Oh, what does diversity mean?
There's a starting point.
There's a starting point. So there are certain key words that come to mind that cause me to question, all right, what are we talking about here? What is it really that you're doing, and why are you doing it? And if you are doing this personally, then what is your staff doing? And I start looking through the staff. And then if the staff is involved in something, well, what does the social media outlook of your organization look like? And I start looking into their activities. And eventually certain things start to come to light. There will be a little thing that's just not quite right. And I'll follow that lead. Okay, we participated in this event. Okay, what was that event? You know, who
Wow.
was
So
involved
you
in
just
that?
keep
And
going and going
yeah,
down that certain direction until you get some
yeah.
verifiable, solid, undeniable answers. It's like
Well, and
life.
it's all predicated on the idea that we don't take anything at face value. So if they say that they were participating in something, we ask the question, well, what does that mean? What is the thing that you're participating in? What's involved in it? What was its mission statement? You know, if we don't take anything for granted and we don't just allow them to say, oh, we were doing this wonderful event. Well, what was wonderful?
Yeah, for the Catholic Campaign for Human Development. We want to develop humans. Isn't that a nice sound?
Yeah, oh, it's wonderful.
And then you find out.
Tell us, you find out that
tell us about that report. Yeah, let's go right there, because this is kind of fresh.
Right. So the Campaign for Human Development has a series of networks that they have been funding since the beginning.
Beginning of the 1970s, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have to remember the CCHD was created for the specific purpose of financing Saul Alinsky's community organizing groups. That's why it was created.
And Saul Alinsky is a well-known communist.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, he wouldn't call himself one.
No,
but if you read his book, he absolutely is one.
Yeah, I say that because I joke about being a blonde. So I always think about my mom. You know, she's 76 and she watches and she's like, I don't know all of this. So I'm kind of, you know, not making assumptions that everybody doesn't know. So Saul Alinsky, by those who, he was a communist. He wrote this famous book. He created community organizing, of which Barack Obama followed this model and implemented it himself in his own districts in Illinois. So I'll just stop right there.
So Obama worked for the Gamaliel Foundation, which is one of the largest networks of organizations that gets financing from the CCHD. I actually have a friend who he worked for the diocese or the Archdiocese of Chicago, and he obtained a copy of one of the checks that was written from the CCHD to Barack Obama to undergo certain training. So yeah, absolutely. And so you have various network groups. The Gamaliel Foundation I mentioned, there's a group called DART. There's another group called the Industrial Areas Foundation. They all they all have a network of groups that receive gobs of money from the CCHD. One of these groups is called the PICO Network. PICO Network was created in 1972 by a couple of Jesuits who were modeling their work off of Saul Alinsky's groups. So they were all trained by Alinsky and his community organizing assets. And they started the PICO Network. And the whole idea was, well, we want to take Saul Alinsky's community organizing idea and turn it into a faith initiative. So this is why PICO was able to get into a whole bunch of different parishes around the country, following Saul Alinsky's community organizing model, but with a faith spin to it. In 2017, PICO changed its name to Faith in Action. So there's a little bit of a transition here where I'll talk about PICO, but I'm also talking about Faith in Action because they're the same group.
Right.
In 2016, PICO got a $500,000 grant from the CCHD. In 2020, after it had changed its name to Faith in Action, our organization conducted a series of investigations into what Faith in Action was doing. And we produced, I think, about 4 different reports showing that Faith in Action was electioneering on behalf of Joe Biden. It was electioneering on behalf of Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff. It was electioneering on behalf of several other Democrats, which, I mean, this is strictly forbidden.
Yeah, it's a faith group, but they're being political, and they're political for one party, and it's the party that goes against all the teachings of the Catholic faith.
Right, right. So, you know,
even a blonde can understand that.
Right. It's a very simple problem, and it should have negated their ability to ever get a grant from the CCHD ever again. Instead, the CCHD circulated an internal memo where they said, oh, anybody who thinks that they were electioneering on behalf of, that didn't happen. That just didn't happen. And the only reason that the Lepanto Institute is using this incendiary rhetoric in order to do this is because they hate our mission and they hate their mission, and they don't want us to be able to help the poor, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they changed the narrative, they deflected, and then they attacked the messenger. Fast forward, that was in 2020. This year, on June 24th, which is the day that the Dobbs v. Jackson decision was made, where they overturned Roe versus Wade, Faith in Action put out a public national statement from its national network stating that they were going to side with defending Roe versus Wade, and they vowed to fight for reproductive justice, which means fighting for
abortion,
women's right to have an abortion.
Yeah.
So now you have this situation where the CCHD, meaning the US bishops, have so vehemently defended Faith in Action, and then Faith in Action turns around and says, hey, guess what? We're pro-abortion, and we're vehemently pro-abortion. Now where does the
and
CCHD,
publicly,
right?
now they're public
Right.
about it.
And they had several of their local affiliates come right out and say the same thing. Faith in Action in Florida, which directly gets funding from the CCHD, issued a similar set of statements. So they're stuck. And what we really need, and your viewers can really help with this, contact your local Campaign for Human Development director, contact your bishop and say, Your Excellency, or you, CCHD director, explain to me why the CCHD is in bed with this network of organizations that is directly, specifically, and publicly pro-abortion. Please explain that to me.
How do you suggest people do that? Because I get those things all the time. I have heard that phone calls and handwritten letters work the best. And part of me, I'm an optimist by nature, but every now and then these things get so big that I'm like, they aren't going to read it. They'll just say, who cares? What have you found? Have you found that it works, or have you found that it just irritates them enough that it slows them down? And give people incentive to make that phone call and to write those letters. Have you seen proof that they work?
Yes, because people have forwarded me the responses that they get. And when they do make those phone calls, please do respond to us with the response that you get, because then we can use that to continue to further the conversation and say, all right, are you going to defund this organization? Are you going to refuse to participate with this group ever again? And then please also explain why it got to this point anyway. Lepanto Institute was warning you about this group in 2020 and you defended them. And then they turned around and they stabbed you in the back and they said, hey, we're pro-abortion, just like the Lepanto Institute said they were. So if you can't even catch that with your closest friends, how can you possibly catch that with the rest of the groups that you're funding? You have to ask the questions. But I highly recommend—
And be persistent too, is what I'm getting from you.
Yeah. Don't just settle for a one-off where you're,
be those bulldog parents like we're seeing in school boards that are just not letting the school boards rest.
Yep. Talk to your pastor too. Get your pastor to ask the question. Sit down with your pastor and say, look, here's the evidence. This is the photograph of Faith in Action's homepage where they said, we're defending Roe versus Wade. You call the CCHD. You call your bishop.
You're my pastor.
You're my pastor.
Well,
be our advocate, and ask them to explain this, because this doesn't make any sense to us.
Here's the thing too, Michael, the pastors, when they're required, the bishop says you have to announce this as your homily this week, which is like, most priests I know are like, I hate for the money ask part. But if I were a priest and I knew that this was bad, I would say, okay, I'm supposed to ask for money for the CCHD, but let me tell you what they do with their money. And I would make that announcement. I wouldn't just read a pat pre-printed announcement that was given to me by the bishops. Because let's kind of just again, I joke about, being a blonde, I'm a smart person. But I always felt like sometimes we talk so much here that we need to bring it down. So let's just say this clearly as we can be. When we put money in the baskets for those second collections, such as for the Catholic Campaign for Human Development, our bishops take 100% of that money. Sometimes they give it back to us if they've made that promise, right?
So
They spend all that money on whatever they want, right? So can you help our people know your money is going there and you have no control of it once it goes in that basket?
right. So when you give unspecified funds to your collection plate, then there's no designation for it. If you write a check to your parish, but it's not designated for something, then it goes into the general pot. And what happens is the diocese taxes each parish a portion of their overall collections for the year in their general fund. So if you were to write a check, say, for the electric bill, then that money can only be applied to the electric bill, and they have to put it in their budget that way. If everybody specified the funds and says this goes to vestments, this goes to
The piano that you need. This one goes to the capital campaign that's building the new church.
right,
Then the bishops can't touch it.
that's right. They can't
Oh,
touch
okay.
that.
I
because it
had
has to-
suspected that, Michael. You have just helped me because, I'm going to say this publicly. My husband and I felt convicted for many years. We give 10% of our income,
Sure.
and we were giving almost all of it to the church. And in the past 4 years, 3 years, I don't remember when, we stopped giving to the church and give it to organizations directly because we just didn't. I love my priests. We have been so blessed with holy men.
Mhm.
But we weren't trusting that they had control of that money. So this gives me great peace knowing that none of I can go back to giving money to my church, is what you're saying, as long as I specifically say, here's where I want it to go. And the fact that we're having a capital campaign right now to build a new church, I should feel safe with that.
I would. I mean,
Okay.
obviously money is fungible. So if you put in money for a designated thing, but then a lot of other people put in for the general fund, then all you're doing is shuffling cards.
But my conscience is clean.
But your conscience would be clear, and you would also know that you're at least not participating in the national collections, which that's really kind of the biggest part of the problem, are the national collections.
You want to talk more about them?
Yeah.
We talked
So-
about the Catholic Campaign for Human Development. There's more.
Yeah, I do want to talk about that because the one of the things that bishops will say, if you point out, look, this money that was spent in 2020 to 2021 on various organizations went to these different groups that are all pro-abortion, pro-contraception, et cetera, et cetera. And the bishop will say, yes, but none of those groups were from my diocese. Our diocese is clear, so it's okay. That's not how it works. Because when the CCHD collects funding, 25% of that money remains in the local diocese, and the other 75% goes to the national collections, and it's in a general pot. So it's not like it's going just to that particular diocese for the national collection. It's going to all of the collections. So if you're in the Tampa Bay diocese and an organization in Alaska gets a grant, and this organization is partnered with Planned Parenthood, and your bishop says, yeah, but that's in the Alaska diocese, has nothing to do with me, except that the national pot took some of Tampa Bay's money and gave it to the problem in Alaska. So if there is an issue with any of the collections, it is a problem that is relative to all of the bishops throughout the country, not just the one in which we found the problem. So that's one way of addressing this kind of thing. The other thing is that most of the national collections go directly to the USCCB.
That was my next question. So really any second collection is going to the bishops.
Yep. And see, that's the thing. When we say USCCB, people like to say the bishops, but the problem is that the bishops don't run the show. It's a bunch of bureaucrats. And these bureaucrats who can't ever seem to be fired, regardless of how egregiously they violate church teaching, they remain. A bishop will come and go. It's kind of like the bureaucrats that work in Washington, D.C. Politicians come and go, but the bureaucrats continue to remain the same. And so the problem is the second collection itself. The problem is the USCCB. Anything that goes to the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops is a serious problem. And I think everybody needs to finally address the fact, hey, we've got to stop participating in these national collections altogether because the
I've tried so hard.
USCCB as an entity is corrupt.
I have tried, Michael. It's so funny when I'm in the choir. So I sit in the front of the church because I go to Novus Ordo and I get to watch, and I see how many hands still put in for those second collections. And I'm thinking, how do you not know? How do you not know? How do you not know? You guys are active in the church. And I'm not judging them because, until I heard you, until I heard Church Militant, until I had my eyes open, I've been red pilled, I didn't know. But I'm like, this is 2022. We are 4 year, 19, 20, 20. Yeah, 4 years out from the summer of shame.
Right.
My diocese is run by a bishop who was McCarrick's secretary. And I just, so I can get frustrated, I can get angry, but the new Christine is like, what, Holy Spirit, enlighten them. Because what I see, Michael, is right now, prior to 2018, we're sitting on a fence. And I'm seeing sheep and goats, wheat and chaff. I mean, it's like the sifting has begun, the division has begun. God is saying, pick a side. Pick a side. You're no longer allowed to sit on the fence. And so that's why I'm going out of my way. I do these podcasts. I get great guys like you going, please, people, watch. And it doesn't matter if you're in Argentina or Australia, or, we're talking about the USCCB, but be careful where you give money. We no longer can be just trusting sheep. We have to be proactive and active recipients of our information and not just passive receivers of it.
That's right. That's right. And we also have to recognize that we have a serious problem with corruption in the Vatican, unfortunately. And I mean, you brought up Peter's Pence. That's only one very small portion of the major problems that we're finding. One of the reports that I sent you was on the World Meeting of Popular Movements, the fourth meeting of the World Meeting of Popular Movements that took place in November of last year. The Vatican put together a highly professional video. It was an hour-long video, and the first 45 minutes profiled a bunch of different organizations that they said were fighting poverty, and they were part of the popular movements of the day, and they're doing, the God's. Yeah, that's right. Yep. And
it's like one of those, what's her name? Roma Downey commercials with the dogs and and you're like, you don't want to not give money to these puppies or they'll die, right? It's totally. Anyway, keep going. That was
so this highly polished video profiled all of these different groups, and the vast majority of them were active communists. And I'm not talking like your pot smoking variety that you find on a college campus. We're talking the AK-47, we're going to start a revolution kind of communists. Wow. And just as an example, one of the first profiles that they did is on an organization called MST. It's an acronym for a Spanish word, Movimiento dos Trabajadores, something or other. Semterra, I think is what it is. And the MST is itself a communist organization by name. They cite from Karl Marx. They put out an annual picture of Karl Marx. They took a picture of Karl Marx with an MST hat on his head. They did what they call, so one of the women that they represented in the Vatican video, her name is Ceres Hadich. And Ceres Hadich was speaking in this Vatican video, and she was talking about movements and helping the poor and the downtrodden, etc. I went to her Facebook page, and right away, I found a video that she did with her husband and two young boys. It was a read aloud of the Communist Manifesto. And behind them, in the background music, they played the Communist Internationale. Da, 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 that music. Okay. These are not like, okay, we might cite,
these aren't small potatoes who don't know what they're doing. These are active participants.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. These are literal communists. And we found 6 different examples, including Pico participating in the World Meeting of Popular Movements. At the end of the video, Pope Francis starts singing his praises of these groups. He calls them a veritable invisible army. Calling an organization of communists an invisible army is like talking about revolutionaries. It's literally the 5th column. What is an invisible army? An invisible army is an army of insurgents inside the city walls that are ready to activate at a moment's notice. That's the definition of the 5th column. Calling them an invisible army is recognizing that they are a 5th column and they are ready to start revolution all throughout the world when the time comes. It's a terrifying prospect, but the recognition that they got from the Pope in that particular way says something very serious. And I think you can draw the conclusion from that.
From those of you, for many, many years, Michael, I would always hear communism. I was like, well, I know it's not good, but what I want everyone to leave the show knowing and having no question about that. Communism is at its core atheism. It is going to say, we do not want to worship God. We do not want God to control your life. We want the government to control your life. So it's not just about we as a government. We want God out. And so be clear about what communism is. Again, I'm 57 years old, Michael, and these are things, ashamedly, that I'm only learning in the past 4 or 5 years, going, yeah, I've never really liked communism, but why? Going, so when our Pope is saying an invisible army, here's an army of people who want you to go against God.
Yeah.
You can't rephrase that.
No.
It just can't be any clearer than that. And
That's
that
right.
is terrifying.
It should be. It absolutely should be. I mean, we did a video. It's about 20 minutes long. I encourage people, go to our website, lepantoin.org.
It's posted right underneath this video.
Yeah. And go to the website. You can look up Pope Francis calls communists a veritable invisible army. Just look for those terms and you'll find the report. And if you go to our YouTube channel, you'll see it. It's actually a little bit easier to find it there. But if you look up Lepanto Institute, you'll find our YouTube channel pretty easily. And we produced a 19-minute video on this, showing all of the evidence. I showed exactly what they were saying. I showed the Vatican clips from the Vatican video where they were praising these groups, and I showed exactly what Pope Francis was saying to them. And I'm not exaggerating anything. This is all just what they are doing and who they are and what the Vatican is praising.
Exaggerate. It is sad that you don't even have to exaggerate. That you can just say straight up and not have to make assumptions. It's just the state of the world that we live in and the state of the church.
Right. Prior to that, we did a video, a whole video report exposing the fact that Caritas Internationalis, which is the international umbrella group for all of the aid and development agencies of the church. So like Catholic Relief Services, for instance, it is the Caritas member of the United States Catholic Conference of Bishops. You've got CAFOD in England and Cordate in the Netherlands. They're all affiliates of Caritas Internationalis. Caritas Internationalis is on the governing body of an international communist organization called the World Social Forum. And this organization, they literally march through the streets with hammer and sickle flags, red flags with the hammer and sickle on them. They parade through the streets with banners of Karl Marx. They sell T-shirts of Marx, Lenin, Simon Bolivar, and other communist radicals, Che Guevara.
My husband was on a U.S. ship called the Simon Bolivar.
Yeah,
he was a communist radical.
Oh yeah, he was a Freemason.
And we named a ship after him.
Mm-hmm.
Good to know.
Yeah, isn't that great?
Yeah.
But Caritas Internationalis is on the governing body of this institution. We have video of their live streamed event from last year where they were all talking, they were coordinating and talking about how they were going to start propagating pro-abortion initiatives in Catholic countries. And it was all modeled off the way that they were able to transform Argentina into a pro-abortion country. They parade through the streets promoting LGBTQ activism. So, I mean, it's everything that's wrong with the world. And Caritas is on the governing body called uh, International Council of the World Social Forum. But it's all par for the course. So you've got Pope Francis in the Vatican praising the World Meeting of Popular Movements, praising a bunch of communists. And then you've got Caritas Internationalis, which is heading an international agency that is promoting communism throughout the world. So it's a snowball effect. And you see this trickle down going into all the local groups. So it's no wonder that the Campaign for Human Development is doing what it's doing.
What do we do?
Well, we already talked about no longer taking up collections for these organizations. We also talked about
making those phone calls, right?
Okay, making phone calls, sending emails. Emails are better because that way you can get an electronic answer that I can then report on.
Yes, good to know.
But ultimately, the most important thing for us to do is to fast and pray, because we have to recognize that we are being chastised. This is a chastisement. Okay, God is not happy with us. He's not happy with us because we are turning towards worldly things in order to give answer to the problem of whatever ails us for the day. And we are eschewing the cross by saying, hey, I don't want to suffer. I don't want to suffer at all. So I'm going to do whatever I can to make myself as comfortable as possible. Now, believe me, I love my air conditioning, so I'm part of the problem as well. But
mine is the bun warmers in my car.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know how to tell when the bun warmers are on in my car? You smell crispy bacon. Sorry, just a levity for a tough show.
Right.
But you're right. So we want our comforts.
That's right. We want our comforts, which means if we want to see a turnaround, we have to start doing penance. We have to start eschewing the comforts that are so common to us and saying, no, tonight I'm not going to have dessert, or I'm not going to have lunch today, because I need to fast in order to give Our Lady some additional graces that she can then use to turn this thing around. We have to pray our rosary every day, as she requested at Fatima. Wear the brown scapular. Do the 5 first Saturdays. You know, she gave us the blueprint back in 1917. It's pretty simple, but how many of us are actually doing it? How many of us come up with excuses as to why we can't? And the more we have a movement built up around the grace of the church, earning the graces for the transformation and eventually the triumph of Our Lady's Immaculate Heart, that's when things are going to turn around. So it's a couple of simultaneous things. Pray, inform, okay? Inform people. A lot of them are ignorant. They just don't know what's really going on. So inform them of the things that we're reporting on, and demand answers. So those are the 3 primary things that I always recommend.
Wow. So I'm not trying to put you on the spot, because I'm certainly not as good as I should be. I ashamedly only pray 1 rosary a day, right? Sometimes I get 2 because I fall asleep, but have you, since you've started doing this research, increased your prayers in that area? Because I mean, here you are, the Lepanto Institute, you got this rosary around your logo. Have you begun to do that more often and more earnestly? And have you noticed fruit, either in your own life or, well, I mean, you've already talked about a little bit of fruit, that just how Our Lady just was like, let me open this door for you. You know what I mean? I don't know if that's too personal of a question.
Not at all. No, because the fact of the matter is that grace builds upon grace. So the more you open yourself up to the actions of grace, the more grace will be poured out on you, and the more you will have a desire to draw in more graces. So it's kind of like that, you know, you've got a straw, and if you start sucking on the straw, you want to get to the bottom of the drink. So you continue sucking on the straw, and then you get more. So when we pray the rosary daily, at first, those who are not used to it or accustomed to it will find it difficult. But once you get over the hump, then you find, okay, what else can I do? Can I give up a meal today? Can I give up a particular food? Back in 2023, I heard a sermon once.
No, 2023 hasn't come yet.
I'm sorry, 2003.
Okay, I got you back.
Sorry, I'm thinking backwards. So in 2003, I heard a sermon once about storing up your treasures in heaven. And I thought, well, what does that mean? What does it mean to store up your treasures in heaven? And I thought, well, if you have treasures here on earth, things that you enjoy, things that you like, and that you want to imbibe in, then once you enjoy that treasure, you have had your reward, as our Lord would say.
Mm.
But if you say, I'm going to set this aside, this is something that I really want, but I'm not going to indulge in that because I would much rather have the reward in heaven, then that's what we mean. And so in 2003, I thought, well, what do I enjoy? What are my top 3 best things? Well, I love beer, I love football, and I love donuts. So donuts got the shaft. I haven't had a donut since.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I mean, I love donuts.
I love donuts.
So it was hard at first, but then I started looking for other things that I could give up. You know, what else can I give up?
Beer? Did you give up the beer?
Not yet.
It's like I'm a Milwaukee girl. Who does that, right?
I know. So, you know.
But you know what's really funny too, Michael, is my girlfriend, because I fast 2 days a week because our mother said to do so. And at first it was really hard to do that first day. And then I add that second day, I was like, and I've gone through periods where I like to told my spiritual director, I'm done. I'm tired. I want to see some, I'm like, had my little attitude. And for 2 Lents in a row, Lent of 20 and Lent of 21. Now, let me just put this out there. I'm always cold. I always blast the heat. Like when you get in my car, everyone's like choking and like, and I blast the heat in my car so much that I had patent leather shoes once and they melted the toe of the shoe. So let's just go right there. Okay.
Oh.
So 2 Lents in a row, I felt the Holy Spirit say to me, take off your socks. Because I go to bed with socks, I wear socks around the house, I want to be warm. And if your feet are cold, your whole body is cold. And it's like, I can't do it. Please let me just starve 3 days a week. And I recently had a friend say, well, fasting is easy for you. I'm like, it's not easy because it's easier for you than for other people. I'm like, so do something harder. This Lent was the first time I took off my socks, and it was hard to walk around the house barefoot. But what happened, and here's an analogy I'll give to many people, and this works very, very well. I coach couples. And so when they're like, I'd rather throat punch my spouse right now. And I'm saying, well, you should probably love them. But one of the analogies I give people when we're trying to please God or not is like, this is it. When you go to the hospital, you get those little smiley faces. How do you feel today? Happy, sad, just picture 2 of those little faces. One is Jesus, one is Satan. If you choose to pick up a donut, what does Satan's face do? He smiles. What does Jesus do? He frowns. Now, for some of us, seeing Jesus frown is enough. For me, that wasn't enough. When I saw Satan smile, I had a visceral response because I was like, dang it, I do not want Satan to smile. So when I took my socks off, it was like, you're not going to win this one, Satan. And then I started to see Jesus smile because it was something. So for anyone watching, what Michael and I are talking about is anything that can cause it. And then in that void too, I mean, you would suggest probably same as me, don't just stop wearing the socks or stop eating the donut. When your stomach, has a hunger pang because your family's eating donuts and you're not, tell God thank you for that hunger pang and offer it up, right? So I'll kind of let you take it right there since you're on this prayer and fasting thing.
Yeah. My wife, very wisely once, I was complaining about something and she pointed over at the crucifix and said, have you given enough? And I went,
You married you a good wife.
Yes, I did. So she keeps me honest. Yeah. But the thing about keeping a constant and steady prayer life, we have to remember that a constant and steady prayer life doesn't have to be rote prayers. Right. The rosary is something that Our Lady specifically requested, and there are a lot of graces attached to the rosary. I highly recommend it. I think that it is probably the most powerful prayer outside the Mass. Aside from that, it's about maintaining a relationship, because you have to remember, what are we doing when we're praying? we're talking to God, we're talking to the saints, we're talking to our friends, we're talking to our family. And they are in the spiritual home that we want to be in. So when we pray and we have these conversations, it is a conversation. I'll never forget once I was really tired and I was getting ready to go to bed, and I was lying in bed, I was starting to fall asleep. And suddenly I remembered I haven't said my rosary today. And I started turning over to the side and I was like, you know what? I'll just say another one tomorrow or something. Our Lady understands.
That's nice.
And as I was falling asleep, I don't know if it was a dream or my imagination, but I started imagining a conversation between Our Lady and the devil. And the devil said to Our Lady, see, he's not your son. He's not going to do what he promised. And Our Lady said, he is my son. He will do as he promised. Well, there it was. I grabbed my rosary and I got up out of bed. I started saying my rosary in bed, just, lying down with my head on the pillow.
But you're falling asleep.
And then my guardian angel said, are you really going to say the rosary like you're lying in a casket? Fine. I got up and I went into the prayer room and I started saying my rosary on my knees, because that was the only way I was going to stay up anyway. But so that it is a conversation. And we have to remember our guardian angel also has a very strong desire for our salvation. So if we're having a conversation with our guardian angel, he'll have a conversation with us. Like my guardian angel did that one night. Are you really going to say the rosary like you're lying in a casket? You're right. You're right. And you just kind of shake your head and you go, okay, yep, that's the way it goes. And it's your friends who are saying, do the right thing. This is our mother. How are you going to, say she understands? How do you know? You can't speak for her. So just do what she asks. Do what you promised you would do. You promised you would pray the rosary every day. And so I did. So, and that's how we have to remember prayer. And as we continue to develop that relationship, that's where we are going to see the greatest fruits born out of our prayer life, our spiritual life.
That's my weak spot. I'm just going to say it publicly. And I think I need prayers. My husband gets on his knees and he prays the rosary, and I'll lay in bed and pray it. And I always have this thing about, especially since I turned 40 and your sleep changes at 40. It's like, if I miss that window of when I can fall asleep, then I'll be up all night. And so I'm like, no, God won't mind. Our mother won't mind if I fall asleep praying the rosary. Cause it's my second one at least usually. Mm-hmm. But, listening to you going, I need to get up and hurt. I need to be on my knees or be cold or be on the kneel or in front of the cross, because if you watching this, think about it, say a prayer that I can be a better prayer, a better warrior for our Lord, because you're right. I'd rather have my glory in heaven than have it here, be right. Without suffering. You've kind of answered my last question, which I always ask my guests, is name one thing you'd have our listeners do differently as a result of something they heard today. You've said a lot, but I'll let you kind of sum it up again.
Okay.
One thing you have them do different.
So first of all, keep yourself informed. If you haven't been informed on the things that we've talked about today regarding the Campaign for Human Development, Catholic Relief Services, go to our website and start familiarizing yourself with the things on our reports. We have a charity reports list. You can look at it in the drop-down menu at the top. There we have a bunch of different organizations that we recommend or do not recommend for charitable giving, and we have the reasons why. It's in the chart. And you can click the name of the organization if it's marked not safe, and that'll take you to the report page showing you exactly why it's not safe. So if you've never done that before, I highly recommend you go to our website and do that.
And that's lepantoin.org or lepantoin.com.
.org.
lepantoin.org.
That's right.
Keep going.
And aside from that, it's the stay informed, inform others, and remain anchored to the faith. Just engage in that prayerful conversation with Our Lady that she asks. Make reparations to her Immaculate Heart, because that's what is offending her today, are all of those different things that are being done in the name of the church, being done in the name of our Lord, that are contrary to the faith. The promotion of LGBT activism, the promotion of contraception, all of the horrors in the faith that are going on right now are all thorns in Our Lady's Immaculate Heart. So make those reparations. I highly encourage people to do that, because in repairing for those sins, the sooner we will see the triumph of her immaculate heart. That's what we want.
Amen. All right. Well, here's a fill in the blank. It's the last thing I'll ask. When I die, I will know my life has been a success if
I get to heaven.
pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Yeah. That's all we're here for. Let's get to heaven.
Yep.
Michael, I am so honored that I got you on the Breakfast with Bacon show. The work you are doing is divinely inspired. Our Lord doesn't want us giving money to things that go against him. And so the fact that he called you to that, and I know your pay isn't great. Can people donate to the Lepanto Institute? How do they do that?
So on our website, lepantoin.org/donate, there's also a little donate tab that you can click, and it'll take you to the pay page, and you can fill it all out right there. We go through a company called Antidote, which is a Christian company that does not engage in any promotion of anything antithetical to the faith. So there's no moral qualm about giving even through that particular platform.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about PayPal and all that stuff.
Right.
And so are you a 501c3?
We're a 501c3 tax exempt organization, so you can write it off on your taxes.
Absolutely. So go give money. Do the research. You guys, let Lepanto Institute do the research. If you're just, you're like me, you're not called to do it. I'm called to have the smart people on my show and let them talk about it. Your vocations are all different. But this is this man and his ministry and his people are doing the research so that God can fulfill what he said in the Bible, that everything that is done in the dark will be seen in the light. And he needs money to do that. And rest assured, he will never be given money by the church's Catholic Campaign for Human Development. So it's going to have to come from the sheep. So I would encourage you guys. So share this show with other people, because they're going to want to know, who is Michael Hichborn? What is this Lepanto thing again? Go to my website, breakfastwithbacon.com. This show will be uploaded. You're probably watching it on YouTube or Rumble. Go to Rumble. I say at the end of all my shows, we won't be here for long. I've already been censored. Everyone that's telling truth has been censored. Do not be a passive recipient of information waiting for it to come to you. Oh, look, Bacon did another show. Go after those people who shows you respect, because if you go to my website, you'll make sure to get it, because it's not always going to be here. So breakfastwithbacon.com, you can find all the other amazing guests God has given me: Bishop Athanasius Schneider, Michael Voris, Father James Altman. I've had Abby Johnson, and I can't even think of how many amazing people who are out there speaking the truth in a culture that's deaf. And that's what we've got to do. So I would be honored if you would subscribe to my channels and let me point you to people like this here. So Michael, we're going to go off the air, and and go ahead and like me on Facebook and Instagram. Do you have a Facebook and Instagram page, even though they're owned by Satan?
Facebook, not Instagram.
Okay, so go and like us wherever you find us. So that stuff helps a lot. All right, we're going to go off the air. I am Dr. Christine Bacon. You've been watching Breakfast with Bacon, and I want to remind you always to live your life
with scrambled eggs.
With scrambled eggs or sunny side up.
Sunny side up.